So today we are going to learn how to create something like this. This is a non-realistic stylized way to render out your sheets or even designs. In some cases, it's efficient to use the stylized render to exaggerate or emphasize what we are trying to design. In some cases, I have seen it to happen that sometimes the realistic environment lets you to get lost in the realism rather than the design. So this is one way to keep your viewers inside your design instead of just looking at pretty pictures. So let's get started. So I'll start with Rhino. I will start with some basic housekeeping as I always do. I am going to the units, changing into feet and architectural, change it into feet, and then I'll just start my modeling process. I'll not go into much detail. I have generalized idea of a slider, come crawler, play space. So I'll just try to create that. I start with a circle, then I offset it to a rationalized way. Then I rebuild. So in order to rebuild, I might to do some eyeballing. I have to understand how many subdivisions I want. So I'll start with that. Let's make it 16 for now. And yeah, let's now select each alternate sets of point from both of the circles to like deselect something, just control and drag. That would help you out. And again, you don't have to follow this design. This is just something I thought of, but please feel free to reach out and see how it goes. Now, with each alternate points, I have dragged them up a little to see how it goes. But as you can see that these sets of points are not working, so I'm selecting control points on curve and now doing the same thing one more time. It's a trial and error process. So after selection, let's move them up to see how this expression works out. Now let's make it more precise. So I'm moving them up like 5 feet. So it's still accessible by the children, it's safe, and the children will still crawl under it. So yeah. Now I'm lofting the two curves. So we have a continuous surface. But this is not the end. This needs to be more detailed. So I'm going to use grasshopper for this. But you can also use path curve. So yeah, you could like follow that, but I'm going to speed this process up a little bit. So one thing I wanted to add is that if any of you are interested in what or how I created this specific object, I will kind of attach a cleaner version of the script that you're seeing here, and yeah, you can work with it. So now that we have the geometric object with us, let's now model the site. I'll create a very simple mound in a rectangular site. So I'll start with some B-splines and then kind of create some more. This would give us the outline of how the mound is going to go up. So you have a basic idea of the shape of your contours. So yeah, this is the process. Now I'm creating the overall site. I'm just eyeballing this, but you have to be very specific on your design. So in my mind, I envisioned each contour lines 5 feet, each of the lines that I created at 5 feet difference. So yeah, I'll just do that. I'll move them over z-axis at 5 feet. And now that we have everything, the one of the ways that you could create a nice contour that a closed contoured site is to loft your lines with a point. So I have created that point and I'm moving that up. That's exactly 20 feet. I made a small mistake, so that would be 15 feet, I think. So now I'm lofting all the curves and that central point. And if I'm happy with the result, I'll just hit OK. Now we have the site. So after I have created the site, it's important to have some diagrammatic expressions for our design rationale. So I will create an intersection of roads at the center of this circular play structure. So I am creating two lines, one in offset with another. I will now rotate these sets of line at 90 degrees. One of the ways you could do that is alter and click on that arc and type in 90. That way you'll have a copy that's rotated at 90 degree. So let's move them in place. Let's trim them properly for roads. So I'll hide my site. Select all the roads for trimming at first. And after I'm done, I'll just fillet them. And this radius again will come from your design rationale. So keep that in mind. Now, one way I always create my curved roads that kind of project onto my surfaces or the side is I do some form of excavation. So the way I do that is I copy my surface for the base and then keep that in a different layer and then trim that with my reference lines. That way I only model my landform once. So you'll find that more in the link in the description. So for a clean trimming, I have extended all the lines that kind of goes beyond the surface of the site. And now I'll just trim it. So for this process, I'll create a new layer, name it something relevant. For this, I'm creating a layer that's named road. I'll change the material color of that layer so that I have an understanding of what's what. And also this will help us in our later stage where we are going to take this into Lumion and render out. So Lumion will grab these materials later on. At the same time, I am planning to create some diagrammatic arrows, so I might create those in this stage. You can see that I'm creating a ground that's green, I'm creating a road that's kind of red. Now I have copied the ground layer at the same place in the road layer. Now I'm gonna select only the line works of the road and trim the surface with it. So yeah, select and trim. That way you only have the roads. You can see how it worked out. It has worked out pretty nicely. We might need to give it some thickness. So select and offset surface for thickness. Keep the direction at correct alignment. You can use the F for flip at this stage. And yeah, we have our road. It's looking nice. So now at this stage, I'm going to create some contour lines. I always think that in an undulated surface, whenever you're creating some form of isometric or axonometric representation of your design, it's good to have the contour lines. So in order to create the contour lines, at first I'm isolating my ground surface, then use the contour command and then draw a line that's perpendicular to the contour direction. So keep that in mind, perpendicular to the contour direction. And my contour interval was 1 feet. So that gives us like 15 contour lines. But lines won't show in a render, so we have to give them some thickness. So I have created a new layer for contour lines, and now I'm going to select all of those lines and give them the pipe command for some kind of thickness. At this point, I'm going to speed things up a little. I'll just create some minor adjustments and like do some layering so that everything is in the right place, everything gets the right material, and so on. Now it's time to create some arrows for the diagrams. So I'll create a polygon with 3 sides that would give us an arrow. Arrowhead. Now I just changed the size of the arrow shape. For the reference of the arrows, I'm going to create some lines where I can place those triangles. I have placed the arrowheads in their right places. I'll follow the exactly same procedure that I used to create the roads. I'm going to speed this section up a little more. The main idea is I create the directional arrows so that they represent how I came into the idea of the roads. You can see that this is again a back and forth process. You might have created your roads in 3D models first, but you may have drawn the arrows initially in your sketchbook. So it's a good idea to keep that in mind, that not every workforce is linear, and you might need to create like a backwards process to kind of represent your thoughts a little more clearly. Now here we have our arrows. I intend to keep them a little bit floating so that they don't intersect with the ground. They represent a clean, thorough surface. Now it's time to go to Lumion. You'll see that I have installed the Lumion Live Sync for Rhino, and it helps me to kind of create a seamless bridge between Rhino and Lumion. That way I can export different phases of my thoughts into Lumion. And this will come in really handy. You'll see. So I have saved the file. I'm going into Lumion, and there's the first version of my arrows. They're pointing directions. Now the initial target of Lumion is not to create realistic render. So I'm directly going into my render settings and creating an orthographic view through the FX. This would help us to get a clearer diagram. Here I'm trying out different effects for Lumion to get an artistic render out, but in the end it's not that important because most of the stylized thing that we are going to create are going to be in Photoshop, not in Lumion. The sole purpose of Lumion is to create some base images for Photoshop. So I'll do that, and you can see that I'm importing things in phase by phase by phase, so that all the render angles are the same, all the effects are the same, but we can get the phases out of whatever we need. So maybe in some phases we are just getting the contour lines, in some phases we are getting the roads, and in some phases we are going to get the arrows. So that's the target here. And you can see that we can go back and forth with the Lumion Live Sync because we need to kind of adjust the width of different elements for the purpose of the diagram. Even though that is not realistic, you don't see a contour line in real life. So after you're done with whatever you have created, it's time to render. But for rendering, see that small M that I just clicked on. So that is the material ID, which will give you an output like this. This would be a solid color, it would help you to select specific color channels in Photoshop with the select color select tool. So yeah, it's a very handy way to get everything out. And I'll do the same thing for different phases now. So everything will get material ID with them. You can see I'm numbering them 0, 1, 0, 2. So those would be the phases that I will represent in my sheet. So now that we have everything, it's time to kind of create some perspective views so that we have like some form of cover shots of our design. So I think this is just right. And then I'll just render it out in a similar fashion. I'll just copy whatever I did, all the effects that I liked, and paste all of those and just delete the orthographic view. That way we have all the effects, but we don't have to recreate all the sets one by one. So I really like this. I might create one or two more just to see which one goes better with the design. And that's how it is. Like you have to like be willing to go back and forth with your design. There's no like end to a design. But as a designer, you have to like decide where to stop. That's an important learning, I think. Let's adjust the camera angles a little. Let's adjust all the views. Get all the effects ready. And this time I'm going to export a photo set instead of one single photo, and I'll use the sky alpha map so that I can clear the sky at any time I want, because in the style that we are pursuing, a realistic sky would be really not the way to go. So yeah, you'll see that when I have start rendering, this black and white channel would be the sky alpha. All the whites would be the sky, so that you just select the white and delete the sky. Or you could just mask it out. That would also be another option for kind of non-destructive workflow. Now that we have all of our things in place, we have rendered out everything, it's time to go to Photoshop. So I'll just open Photoshop and start my editing. Now let's drag and drop all the channels one on top of another in Photoshop. That way we can exactly select what is going to be. If not sure, like just snap it in place. Now go to select and color range and select from the top layer, hide the top layer, and delete all the greens from the bottom layer. That's the beauty of Material ID. Delete that Lumion logo. And now let's do some adjustment. I suggest you play with posterize, threshold, and all the things that are in image and adjustments. That way you can find your own style. So I'll just speed things up a little. You can play with all the settings on your own. I really like this style, so I'm going to push through with this. And everything from now on will be kind of similar. I'll use threshold and levels for my kind of expressionistic style and do everything on top of those, and use the color range command to kind of delete every element that I don't need in my diagrams. It's a good thing to kind of draw inspiration from different sources. So I'm showing you some references that I really like. This is from CEBRA Architects. Um, I think copying is an act of love, so I'll create some diagrams that are kind of representative of their style, not my own, and use some children or like some other elements for the renders. So to draw my different elements, I'm going to use a program called Clip Studio Paint because I feel like this gives me natural ways to draw digitally. But you don't have to, you can just draw something in a paper and then scan and then do some Photoshop to make them more clear. Or you can do basically anything. It's your choice, it's your style. It doesn't have to be like mine, it doesn't have to follow my methods. I'm just showing you one way you could create a representation, a digital representation like this. But you're completely free to do whatever you want. So after I'm done drawing, I'll just save everything as PNG and bring them into Photoshop. In my search for trees, I have found this website. So here you can find really nicely drawn trees, which you can use inside your renders. So I'm just downloading some Adobe Illustrator format files, and I'll just color them in Illustrator later to achieve the stylistic approach I need. So after I have opened one of the files in Illustrator, I'll just edit it a little bit to kind of customize it for my own purpose. For this specific one, I'll just create a solid fill with the black outline, and that way we have a green kind of bush going on. So after I'm happy with whatever I have, I'll just go to File and Export Selection and export my selection as a PNG. That way I can use it in Photoshop later on. Now for this one, if something is as complicated as this and made in different colors, I use the Live Paint Bucket tool. So what it essentially does is it lets me create solid fills in specific regions of my selection that are bounded by clean polyline. So I have to kind of select my colors first, select my object, and then start to use the Live Paint Bucket tool. You can see that if I do not select the object, Live Paint Bucket won't work. So I have selected the object. I am going for the Live Paint Bucket just to be sure that I am not messing up my original file. I have copied it. I have selected my colors, and now I'm starting to do the solid fills. So I'll do this for a bunch of times now and save different trees to create my plant templates. And yeah, this would be a repetition, so I'll speed this up. Now, after you have done all the resource creation and everything, it's time to have some fun. So like just play with all the elements that you have created. I'm sure that like nothing can go wrong at this phase. You just create whatever you want. You just play with whatever your heart tells you to do. And yeah, just have fun. So I am dragging and dropping all the PNG elements that I have created, all the plants and all the children, and placing them to get a nice diagram going on. Now for the perspective render, I think having some ideas on how to use some basic techniques like removing the sky and creating a custom sky of your own might help. So I have dragged and dropped my original image. And on top of it, I'm going to drop the material ID. And I think on top of it, I'm going to drop the sky alpha. Mhm. And now, after I'm done layering all the objects that I need, I am going to use the color range one more time. I'm going to unlock the layer, go to select and color range, select the white, and select the base layer, turn off all the layers that are on top, and delete the sky. Now I'm going to create a custom sky, but before that I need to kind of there are lots of ways you could go about it. You could create a blue gradient, you could do a solid fill, you could just keep it blank. That also works. Here you can see that I am ideating a little. I was not sure at the time of the recording what I need to do, but I'm sure that I need to kind of create something for the replacement of the sky to hold this render in place, to kind of emphasize the need of it. So I might create a vertical hatch. So yeah, I'm creating a custom brush for the hatch. So yeah, go to edit and create brush preset after you are happy with the width of the vertical pattern. Again, edit and set brush preset. Name it. Change the spacing to see what works and what does not. So to get this, you could just press F5, or you could go to the window and brush settings. To see how the brush strokes are coming, I'm going to create a solid fill. I'm not sure how is it going. So on right below my render layer, I'm going to create a blue solid fill. So select the color and alter backspace would give you that. It doesn't have to be blue in the end. I'm going to delete this layer anyway, but this would act as a visual guide. So one way to stabilize your brush is to do that. You can change the setting of stabilization to see how it goes. So yeah, just play around with it. I'm going to change my spacing a little more. I don't like exactly what I did. Fine tune. And after this, it is the same process one more time. You just play with all the elements that you have. You play with the image adjustments. You play with the trees and everything to create kind of a lively environment. The purpose of any render, I think, is to kind of focus and frame the activity and the space. So yeah, do that. As we come to the end of our journey in conceptual rendering, I want to share a little secret with you. When you are composing your sheet in Photoshop, remember, as Bob Ross said, there are no mistakes, only happy little accidents. It's about perfection, it's about expression, it's about telling your story your way. Every design, every brush stroke, every layer you add, it's all part of your unique vision. And sometimes things might not go as planned, and that's okay. Maybe that unexpected layer blend or that misplaced element can lead to something even more beautiful than you had imagined. So, as you work on your composition, go easy on yourself, embrace the journey, the ups and downs, and let your creativity flow. Remember, it's not just about the final piece, but love, passion, and story you pour into it. Keep those brushes moving, keep dreaming, and always believe in the magic of your design. Happy designing.